The morning sun broke across the Austin skyline with a promise that Daniel Rivers desperately wanted to believe in. Standing on the balcony of his modest apartment on South Congress Avenue, he watched the city wake up below him. Early joggers hitting the trail, food trucks preparing for the day, tourists already snapping photos of the colorful murals that made this neighborhood famous. The air still held that cool quality of an April morning in Texas, but Daniel knew by afternoon it would be warm enough to make you remember why they called this place the heart of the Lone Star State. Today was the day. After 7 years of grinding it out in dive bars, honky-tonks, and county fairs across Texas and Oklahoma, today, Daniel Rivers would step onto the main stage of the Twisted Fork Festival in front of 15,000 people. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his coffee mug, and he told himself it was just the caffeine, not the anxiety that had been building in his chest for weeks. "You're gonna kill it today, Danny boy," he whispered to himself, trying to summon the confidence that usually came so naturally when he had a guitar in his hands. But this wasn't just another gig. This was the gig. The one that Tyler Bennett, his manager, had been promising would change everything. Daniel went back inside and looked at the set list taped to his kitchen wall. The one he'd been refining for months. Every song had been chosen carefully. A mix of his original compositions that showcased his songwriting abilities and a few carefully selected covers that would resonate with the traditional country crowd that populated these festivals. He'd rehearsed until his fingers bled, quite literally, changing his guitar strings twice in the past week alone. His phone buzzed on the counter. "Tyler. Morning, superstar. Bus is picking you up at 10:30 sharp. That gives us plenty of time to get to Lockhart. Sound check is at 2 and you go on at 6 Uhr. We've got this choreographed down to the minute." Daniel glanced at his watch. 8:47 a.m. Plenty of time. "I'm ready, Ty. Been ready." "I know you have. Hey, I meant to tell you, George Strait's gonna be there today. He's presenting the Emerging Artist Award after your set. Can you believe that? The king of country himself." Daniel's heart skipped. George Strait had been his hero since he was a kid, learning guitar chords in his bedroom back in Abilene. His father, a mechanic who'd passed away 5 years ago, used to play Amarillo by Morning on repeat in the garage while working on engines. Those memories were sacred to Daniel. Wow! That's incredible, Ty. Just thought you should know. Maybe if you knock it out of the park today, you'll get to shake his hand. All right. See you in a couple hours. Don't forget your lucky boots." Daniel looked down at the brown leather cowboy boots sitting by his door, the ones his father had given him on his 18th birthday. He'd worn them at every important show since he'd started performing professionally. They were scuffed and worn, but he wouldn't take the stage in anything else. By 10:15, Daniel was packed and ready, his guitar cases stacked by the door, along with a duffel bag of clothes and his stage outfit carefully folded in a garment bag. He was wearing jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and those lucky boots. Simple, comfortable, ready to travel. The bus pulled up at 10:32, just 2 minutes late. Tyler was already on board, along with Daniel's band, Pete Callahan on lead guitar, Jake Morrison on drums, and Linda Chen on bass. They'd been playing together for 3 years now, and they'd become more than just bandmates. They were family. "There he is," Pete called out as Daniel climbed aboard. "The man of the hour." The bus was a modest tour bus they'd rented for the occasion. Nothing fancy, but it had comfortable seats, a small bathroom, and, most importantly, working air conditioning. Tyler had splurged a bit because he wanted everyone comfortable and focused. "Morning, everyone," Daniel said, stowing his gear. The energy on the bus was electric, everyone feeding off each other's excitement. As they pulled onto Interstate 35 South, heading toward Lockhart, about 30 miles south of Austin, Daniel finally let himself relax a little. The drive should take about 45 minutes, maybe an hour with traffic. They had plenty of cushion in their timeline. Tyler pulled out his tablet, going over the schedule one more time. Okay, so here's how today unfolds. We arrive at the festival grounds around 11:30, get your credentials, check in with Rebecca Walsh. She's the festival organizer. Great woman. She's the one who fought to get you this main stage slot. Then we load in the gear, sound check at 2 Karu. You've got the stage from 6 Chan to 7:30. And then the awards ceremony is at 8 Harus. Rebecca Walsh, Daniel repeated. Got it. I need to thank her. She's a big fan of yours, actually, Tyler added. She heard you at that showcase in Nashville last September. She told me your voice reminded her why she fell in love with country music in the first place. Jake leaned forward from his seat. Hey, did you guys see the weather forecast? There's a storm system moving through central Texas this afternoon. Tyler waved dismissively. We'll be fine. It's not supposed to hit until after 8 or, and we'll be done and celebrating by then. Daniel looked out the window at the clear blue sky, watching the Texas landscape roll by. The rolling hills, the occasional ranch with cattle grazing, the wildflowers blooming along the highway in brilliant yellows and reds. This was his home, his heart, his music made manifest in geography. Everything about today felt right. Except that at 11:03 a.m., as they approached the exit for Lockhart, the bus made a sound like a dying animal and began to slow down. What the hell? Tyler said, standing up. The driver, a weathered man named Roy, who'd been driving tour buses for 20 years, was frowning at his dashboard. We've got a problem. Engine light just came on, and I'm losing power. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Can you get us to the festival? Roy shook his head, already guiding the bus toward the shoulder of the highway. I need to pull over before we damage the engine further. Could be the transmission. Could be electrical. I won't know until I look. The bus rolled to a stop on the side of Interstate 35, and for a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the clicking of the dying engine and the whoosh of cars passing by at 70 miles per hour. Tyler was already on his phone. Okay, we can handle this. I'll call a mechanic. We'll get another bus. Tyler, Roy said quietly, wiping his hands on a rag as he emerged from examining the engine. This isn't a quick fix. The alternator's shot, and there's coolant leaking everywhere. This bus isn't going anywhere without a tow truck and a full day in a shop. Daniel looked at his watch. 11:11 a.m. They were supposed to be at the festival right now. Sound check was in less than 3 hours. His set was in 7 hours. How far are we from the festival? He asked. Roy checked his GPS. About 12 miles, maybe 15. Tyler was scrolling frantically through his phone. I'm calling for backup transportation. We'll get you there, Danny, I promise. But as Tyler made call after call, to rental companies, to taxi services, to anyone who might have a vehicle available on a Friday afternoon during one of the biggest music festivals in Texas, Daniel could see the worry creeping into his manager's face. Everything was either booked solid or too far away to help in time. Linda spoke up. My cousin lives in Austin. Maybe she could... She'd never make it here in time and then get us to Lockhart, Tyler said, not unkindly. We need something now. Pete suggested hitchhiking. Jake suggested calling the festival directly for help. But every suggestion ran into the same problem. Time. They were running out of it fast, and the solution that would have seemed simple, call an Uber, get a rental van, flag down a passing truck, all fell apart when you factored in the equipment, the guitars, the instruments, the very things they needed to perform. At 11:47 a.m., Tyler finally got through to Rebecca Walsh at the festival. Rebecca, hi, it's Tyler Bennett. We've got a situation. Our bus broke down on I-35 and we're stranded. We're working on getting there, but we might need to push back the sound check. Daniel could hear Rebecca's voice through the phone, tight with stress. Tyler, I've got 15,000 people coming through those gates right now. Your sound check time is locked in. If you miss it, we can't guarantee your set time. We've got 3 other acts on that stage today, and the schedule is tight. I understand, but get here. However you can, just get here. I'll hold your slot as long as I can. But I need you on that stage at 6:40 p.m. Can you do that? Tyler looked at Daniel, and Daniel nodded firmly. We'll be there, Tyler said. After hanging up, Tyler turned to the group. All right, here's what we're going to do. I found a local guy who does transport for hire. He's got a pickup truck and a trailer. He can be here in 30 minutes, and he'll get us and the equipment to Lockhart. It's not ideal. It's definitely not comfortable, but it'll work. Then let's do it, Daniel said. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. They stood on the side of the highway in the growing heat as Roy arranged for a tow truck. Cars and trucks blasted past them, and Daniel found himself thinking about all the shows he'd played in dusty venues where the air conditioning didn't work, and the sound system was held together with duct tape and prayer. He'd overcome worse than this. He had to. The transport guy, a friendly man named Chuck Daniels, who ran a small moving company, arrived at 12:31 p.m. in a Ford F-350, pulling a flatbed trailer. Heard you folks need a ride, Chuck said, surveying their situation. Let's get you loaded up. They worked quickly, securing the instruments and equipment on the trailer, using bungee cords and straps to make sure nothing would shift during the drive. Daniel kept checking his watch. 12:45, 12:52, 1:03. Each minute that passed felt like it was stealing something from him. By 1:15 p.m., they were finally back on the road, cramped into Chuck's extended cab truck, with Pete and Jake squeezed in the back seat with guitars across their laps, and Linda sitting between them. Tyler rode up front with Chuck, constantly checking his GPS for the fastest route. How long to get there? Daniel asked. Chuck glanced at his dashboard. With traffic, maybe 45 minutes, give or take. That would put them at the festival around 2:10 p.m., exactly when sound check was supposed to start. It was going to be tight, but they'd make it. They had to. But Texas, as Daniel had learned in his 29 years of living there, had its own plans. At 1:34 p.m., as they approached Lockhart, traffic on Highway 183 came to a complete standstill. Red brake lights stretched ahead of them as far as they could see. What now? Tyler groaned. Chuck leaned out his window, trying to see what was causing the backup. Looks like an accident up ahead. I can see emergency lights. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He pulled out his phone and checked the local traffic app. A multi-vehicle accident had completely blocked both southbound lanes of Highway 183. Estimated clearance time: unknown. There has to be another route, Daniel said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. Chuck was already pulling up a map. I can take the back roads, cut through some farm roads, but it'll add time. Maybe not as much time as sitting in this traffic, though. Do it, Tyler said. Chuck executed a careful U-turn when he found a gap in the median, and they headed back north before cutting east onto a smaller county road. The landscape changed from highway to rural Texas. Narrow roads that wound through ranch land, past old farmhouses and fields dotted with cattle. It was beautiful country, but all Daniel could think about was the clock ticking away. At 2:17 p.m., Tyler's phone rang. Rebecca Walsh. Where are you? Sound check started 17 minutes ago, and you're not here. I've got Ben Morrison and his band already on stage, and they need every minute of their slot. I'm holding your spot. But Tyler, I need you here now. We're close, Rebecca. 20 minutes, tops. There was an accident, and we had to detour, but we're coming. I swear to you, we'll be there. There was a long pause. 20 minutes. That's all you get. If you're not here by 2:40, I'm going to have to make some very difficult decisions." The call ended, and the silence in the truck was heavy. "Chuck," Tyler said quietly, "I know you're already going as fast as you safely can, but—" "I know," Chuck interrupted. "Hold on, folks. I grew up in these parts. I know every shortcut there is." He proved it, navigating through a series of farm roads that Daniel wouldn't have even known existed, the truck bouncing slightly as they hit uneven patches of pavement and gravel. The trailer behind them swayed but held steady, the equipment secured. At 2:36 p.m., they finally saw the signs for the Twisted Fork Festival. The massive venue stretched across several acres of converted ranch land just outside Lockhart, with 3 stages, vendor areas, camping sites, and parking lots that were already packed with cars and trucks. They could hear music drifting across the fields. Someone was performing, and the sound system carried across the distance. Chuck pulled up to the artist entrance, and Tyler was out of the truck before it fully stopped, waving his credentials at the security guard. "Daniel Rivers and band," Tyler announced. "We're here for sound check." The guard checked his clipboard and nodded, waving them through. They parked near the backstage area, a flurry of organized chaos with crew members moving equipment, other musicians warming up in designated areas, and festival staff rushing around with clipboards and radios. The main stage loomed ahead of them, a professional setup with massive speakers, intricate lighting rigs, and video screens that would display the performers to the crowd. Rebecca Walsh appeared almost immediately, a woman in her mid-40s with short gray hair, wearing jeans, boots, and a festival staff shirt. Despite the stress of the moment, she smiled when she saw Daniel. "You must be Daniel Rivers. Welcome to the Twisted Fork Festival." She shook his hand firmly. "I'm glad you made it, but we need to move fast. Ben Morrison is wrapping up his sound check in 5 minutes, and then you've got 20 minutes, maximum. Can you work with that?" "Yes, ma'am," Daniel said. "Thank you for holding the slot." "I fought to get you on this stage," Rebecca said. "I meant what I told Tyler. I heard you in Nashville, and I knew you belonged here. Now let's make sure everyone else knows it too. Follow me." As they unloaded the equipment and made their way toward the stage, Daniel caught his first real glimpse of the festival grounds. Even though the main performances wouldn't start for a few more hours, the place was already alive with energy. Thousands of people were streaming through the gates, setting up blankets and lawn chairs in the field that faced the main stage, browsing vendor booths that sold everything from barbecue to handmade leather goods, and clustering around the smaller stages where earlier acts were already performing. This was bigger than anything Daniel had ever been part of. Way bigger. Pete squeezed his shoulder as they approached the stage. "We got this, man. Just like we've practiced." The sound check was a blur of organized chaos. They had exactly 18 minutes to test every microphone, balance every instrument, set the monitor levels, and make sure the lighting cues were programmed correctly. Daniel ran through abbreviated versions of 3 songs, working with the sound engineers to get everything dialed in. His voice felt good, strong and clear, cutting through the afternoon air. But the whole time, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that had started on the side of the highway and had only grown stronger as the day progressed. What else was going to go wrong? At 3:04 p.m., sound check was complete. Rebecca gave him a thumbs up from the side of the stage. "Great job," she said. "You've got almost 3 hours until showtime. There's a green room backstage with food and drinks. Get comfortable, stay hydrated, and at 5:30, we'll do a final check before you go on." Tyler clapped Daniel on the back. "See? I told you we'd make it. Everything's going to be fine now." Daniel wanted to believe him. The band retreated to the green room, a large tent with comfortable seating, cold water, sandwiches, and fruit. Other performers were coming and going, And Daniel recognized a few faces from the country music circuit, musicians he'd shared bills with at smaller venues, artists who were also working their way up. He tried to eat, but his stomach was too tight. Instead, he drank water and went over his set list one more time, visualizing each song, each transition, imagining the crowd's response. Linda was doing vocal warm-ups in the corner. Pete and Jake were going over a tricky bridge in one of the songs. Tyler was on his phone, probably posting updates to Daniel's social media accounts. At 3:47 p.m., the sky started to change. Dark clouds were rolling in from the west, moving faster than anyone had anticipated. Daniel stepped outside the tent and looked up, watching the blue sky disappear behind a wall of gray and black. The temperature was dropping too, that sudden shift that happens in Texas when a storm front moves through. "That doesn't look good," Linda said, joining him outside. A festival coordinator rushed past them, speaking urgently into a radio. "We need to know about that storm system. Are we looking at rain or something more serious? The afternoon acts are still going, and we've got thousands of people on the grounds." Daniel felt a knot forming in his stomach again. The weather forecast had predicted evening storms, not afternoon. But weather in central Texas was notoriously unpredictable, especially in spring when cold fronts could collide with warm, humid air to create sudden, violent thunderstorms. Rebecca appeared again, this time looking worried. "We're monitoring the weather closely. Right now, it's just rain in the forecast, but there's a line of storms west of here that's moving faster than predicted. We might have to delay or pause performances if it becomes a safety issue." "What about my set?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Right now, you're still on schedule for 6 hours. But I need you to stay flexible. If we have to pause, we will, and then we'll resume as soon as it's safe. The safety of the crowd comes first." She hurried away, and Daniel went back into the tent, his mind racing. Nothing about today had gone according to plan. The bus breaking down, the traffic accident, the detour. It all felt like the universe was conspiring against him. And now, a storm was threatening to disrupt everything. "Hey," Tyler said, noticing his expression. "Don't spiral. We're here, we're ready, and you're going to blow everyone away. Weather is just weather. We'll deal with whatever comes." Daniel nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this day was far from over, and not in a good way. At 4:23 p.m., the first raindrops started to fall. Light at first, just a gentle patter on the tent roof. But within minutes, it intensified into a steady downpour. The festival coordinators made the call to pause the performances on the outdoor stages until the rain passed. The crowd, rather than leaving, huddled under tents, trees, and whatever shelter they could find, waiting it out with the typical resilience of country music fans who'd weathered worse. Daniel watched from the entrance of the green room tent as rain hammered the festival grounds. The main stage was covered, protected from the elements, but the field where the audience would stand was turning into mud. He could see crew members laying down additional wooden planks and protective coverings to create walkways. The rain lasted 43 minutes, finally tapering off at 5:06 p.m. The sky was still gray and threatening, but the immediate danger had passed. Festival coordinators made an announcement over the PA system that performances would resume shortly. Rebecca returned to the green room at 5:22 p.m. "Okay, we're back on schedule. Your set time is still 6Q, but we need to get you staged and ready. The crew is doing final checks on the stage right now, making sure everything stayed dry and that all the equipment is still functioning properly after the rain." Daniel felt his heart rate pick up. This was it. After all the delays and obstacles, he was finally about to take the stage. At 5:45 p.m., he changed into his stage clothes in a small dressing area. Dark jeans, a crisp black button-down shirt with pearl snaps, a brown leather belt with a silver buckle, and his father's lucky boots. He looked at himself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the man staring back at him. He'd been working toward this moment for so long that now that it was here, it almost didn't feel real. "You look good," Pete said, appearing beside him in his own stage outfit. "You ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The band gathered, and they did their pre-show ritual, a quick huddle where they each said one thing they were grateful for. It was something Linda had started years ago, a way to center themselves before performing. "I'm grateful for this opportunity," Daniel said. "I'm grateful for this band," Pete added. "I'm grateful we made it here in one piece," Jake said with a grin. "I'm grateful for all of you," Linda finished. Tyler was waiting for them as they emerged from the green room. "It's time. They're announcing you in 2 minutes. Get to the stage." The walk from the green room to the stage felt both eternal and instantaneous. Daniel could hear the crowd now, the murmur of thousands of voices, the excitement in the air. Rebecca was waiting at the stage entrance with a headset on, coordinating with the production team. "1 minute," she said, giving Daniel an encouraging smile. "Go show them what you've got." Daniel and his band took their positions on the side of the stage, hidden from the audience's view by black curtains. He could see the stage from here, the instruments set up exactly as they'd arranged during sound check, the microphones positioned perfectly, the lights ready to create the atmosphere they'd planned. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to bring to the Twisted Fork Festival main stage a rising star in country music. You've heard his songs on Texas radio. You've read about him in Country Weekly magazine, and now you get to see him live. Please give a huge Twisted Fork welcome to Daniel Rivers." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and Daniel felt a surge of adrenaline unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He stepped onto that stage, guitar in hand, his band right behind him, and for a moment, he just stood there, taking it all in. The sea of faces looking up at him, the massive speakers that would carry his voice across the field, the lights warming his face. This was everything he'd worked for, everything he'd dreamed about. He stepped up to the microphone, and the crowd quieted, waiting. "Good evening, Twisted Fork Festival," he called out, and 15,000 people roared in response. But what Daniel didn't know, what no one in that moment could have predicted, was that at exactly 6:05 p.m., 37 miles away in Austin, a man named George Strait was in his pickup truck listening to the radio when he heard an announcement that would change the course of this entire evening. The real story was just beginning. George Strait wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the Twisted Fork Festival until 8:00 p.m. His schedule had been carefully mapped out. A quiet afternoon at his ranch outside San Antonio, a relaxed dinner with his wife, and then a leisurely drive to Lockhart to present the Emerging Artist Award. It was the kind of engagement he enjoyed, supporting up-and-coming talent, spending time with people who still remembered why they'd fallen in love with country music in the first place. But at 6:04 p.m., as he was pouring himself a glass of iced tea in his kitchen, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Walsh. "Rebecca," he answered. "Everything all right?" "George, I hate to do this to you, but I need your help. We've got a situation developing, and you might be the only person who can fix it." He listened as Rebecca explained the problem. Daniel Rivers, the young performer who was supposed to headline the main stage from 6:20 to 7:30, had encountered every possible obstacle trying to reach the festival. He'd made it just in time for his set, but barely, and now there was a new crisis developing. "His equipment," Rebecca said, her voice tight with stress. When they were loading it onto that trailer in a hurry, when they were doing the sound check in that compressed time frame, nobody noticed that one of the connections on his main guitar amplifier got compromised. It must have happened during transport or gotten knocked loose. He's on stage right now, and his sound is cutting in and out. Our tech crew is trying to fix it, but it's a complex issue. They need at least 30 minutes, maybe 45. George could hear the desperation in her voice. What do you need from me? We need someone to fill that gap. Someone who can keep 15,000 people entertained while we solve this technical problem. Someone who... She paused. George, I know this isn't what you signed up for. And I know you're not scheduled to perform today, but I'll be there in 25 minutes, George said before she could finish. Really? George, I can't thank you enough. This kid, Daniel Rivers, he's the real deal. He deserves this shot. But everything that could go wrong today has gone wrong. If we lose this crowd, if they start leaving because of technical difficulties, I understand. Send me the exact location for the artist entrance. I'm walking out the door right now. George grabbed his truck keys and his hat. His wife, Norma, appeared from the living room where she'd been reading. Everything okay? She asked. Festival's having some trouble. I'm going to help out. She smiled. The same smile she'd given him countless times over their decades together when duty called. Drive safe. 23 minutes later, George Strait's black Ford F-250 pulled up to the artist entrance of the Twisted Fork Festival. The security guard's eyes widened when he recognized the legendary singer. Mr. Strait, we've been expecting you. Ms. Walsh said to bring you straight to the stage area. George followed the guard through the backstage area, taking in the organized chaos that characterized any major music festival. Crew members hustled back and forth, artists warmed up in designated areas, and the sound of music from multiple stages created a layered soundtrack. He'd been part of this world for over 4 decades, and some things never changed. Rebecca met him near the main stage, relief flooding her face when she saw him. George, thank you so much for coming. I can't believe you're actually here. Tell me what's happening, he said, his attention immediately focused on the situation. They moved closer to the stage where Daniel Rivers was performing, or trying to. George could see the young man's frustration from here. Daniel was singing a cappella while the band played, but every time he'd try to play his guitar, the amplifier would cut out, creating awkward gaps in the sound. The crowd was supportive so far, but George could sense their confusion. The tech crew has isolated the problem, Rebecca explained. It's a faulty connection in the amplifier's input stage, and they need to either repair it or replace it with a backup unit. But either option takes time, and we can't have dead air for that long. A young man approached them. George recognized him as Tyler Bennett from his photo in industry publications. Mr. Strait, Tyler said, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you for coming. Daniel doesn't know yet that you're here. He's out there trying to save his set, but it's falling apart. George watched Daniel for another moment. The kid had talent. You could hear it even in his unamplified voice. He had that authentic quality that couldn't be taught, the kind of sincerity that connected with audiences on a deeper level. This was someone who deserved better than to have his big moment destroyed by equipment failure. Here's what we're going to do, George said, making a decision. I'm going to go out there, join him on stage, and we'll do an acoustic set together while your tech crew fixes the problem. Just 2 voices, and maybe a guitar that actually works. Keep it simple. Keep it real. Rebecca looked stunned. You'd do that? I'm already here, aren't I? Let me talk to Daniel first, though. He should know what's about to happen. They signaled to the stage manager, who discreetly got Daniel's attention during a song transition. When Daniel stepped back from the microphone, Tyler brought him quickly off stage. Daniel's face was a mixture of frustration and embarrassment, sweat beading on his forehead from the stage lights and the stress of the technical difficulties. Tyler, I don't know what to do. The amp keeps cutting out, and the crowd is getting restless. Maybe we should just... He stopped mid-sentence, when he saw George Strait standing there. For a moment, Daniel just stared, his brain clearly trying to process why his musical hero was backstage at his show. "Mr. Strait?" he finally managed. "Call me George," Strait said, extending his hand. "I hear you're having some technical troubles." Yes, sir. Everything that could go wrong today has gone wrong. I'm so sorry you're seeing this." George smiled. "Son, I've been in this business long enough to know that shows never go exactly as planned. But here's the thing. You've got 15,000 people out there who came to hear good country music. They don't care about amplifiers or technical issues. They care about the songs and the singers. So here's what I'm thinking. What if we go out there together? Just you and me, a couple of acoustic guitars, and we give them a show they'll never forget." Daniel looked like he'd been struck by lightning. You want to perform with me? I want to help you. Your equipment will be fixed in about 40 minutes, and then you can finish your proper set. But in the meantime, let's not waste this opportunity. What do you say?" Daniel looked at Tyler, who was grinning broadly, then back at George. "I'd be honored, Mr. George. I'd be honored." "Good. Now, do you know Amarillo by Morning?" Daniel's eyes widened. "It's one of my favorite songs. My dad used to—" He paused, emotion catching in his throat. "Yes, I know it. Perfect. Let's start with that. And Daniel, just be yourself out there. That's all you need to be." 2 minutes later, George Strait walked onto the Twisted Fork Festival main stage carrying an acoustic guitar. The crowd's reaction was immediate and thunderous. Screams, cheers, and applause erupted from the field as 15,000 people realized they were about to witness something unexpected. George stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding yet relaxed. The easy confidence of a man who'd been doing this for longer than some of the audience members had been alive. "Good evening, folks," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "Now, I know you came here to see Daniel Rivers, and you're going to get that show, I promise. But we've got a little technical difficulty we're working through, so Daniel and I thought we'd entertain you with some acoustic music while the crew fixes things up. That all right with you?" The crowd roared its approval. Daniel joined George on stage, carrying a borrowed acoustic guitar, and when the two men stood side by side at the microphone, the contrast was striking. The legend and the newcomer, generations apart but connected by the same love of authentic country music. "This young man tells me his father used to love this song," George said to the crowd. "So this one's for his dad. Daniel, let's show them how it's done." George began the opening notes of Amarillo by Morning, and the crowd immediately recognized it. When he started singing, his voice was as strong and pure as it had been when he'd first recorded the song decades ago. But what made this moment special was when Daniel joined in on the harmony, their voices blending together in a way that gave the classic song new life. Backstage, Rebecca stood with Tyler, both of them watching in amazement. "This is incredible," Tyler breathed. I can't believe this is happening." "George Strait is saving our festival," Rebecca said, "and he's giving Daniel the gift of a lifetime." Out in the crowd, people were recording on their phones, swaying to the music, singing along. But more than that, they were witnessing something genuine. Two musicians, separated by age and fame, but united by their craft, creating a moment of pure country music magic. When the song ended, the applause was deafening. George turned to Daniel and smiled. "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" Daniel shook his head, still processing what was happening. "Thank you. We're just getting started," George said, then addressed the crowd again. "Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I've learned that the best shows are the ones where you just follow your heart and let the music guide you. So Daniel here is going to play one of his original songs for you, and I'm going to listen and learn. Sound good? More cheers from the crowd. Daniel took a breath, steadying himself. This was his chance to show George Strait, and everyone else, what he could do. He launched into Dust on the Dashboard, one of his original compositions about leaving home and chasing dreams across the highways of Texas. His voice was strong and clear, the acoustic guitar providing a simple but effective backdrop. George listened intently, nodding along, genuinely impressed by what he was hearing. This kid could write, and more importantly, he could tell a story through music in a way that felt authentic and lived in. When Daniel finished, George clapped along with the crowd. "That's a damn fine song," he said into the microphone. "You write that yourself?" "Yes, sir." "Well, you've got a gift. Don't waste it." George turned back to the crowd. "How about we do another one together? Daniel, you know, the chair?" "Of course." They performed song after song, sometimes trading verses, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes with George stepping back to let Daniel shine on his own. With each passing minute, the original plan of filling time transformed into something far more meaningful. The crowd was completely engaged, hanging on every note, every story George shared between songs about his career and the lessons he'd learned. At one point, George told a story about his early days playing small clubs in Texas, about the rejection he faced from Nashville initially, about the importance of staying true to your musical roots. He looked at Daniel as he told the story, and everyone in the audience understood that this was as much a teaching moment as it was entertainment. "This business will test you," George said. "It'll throw obstacles at you when you least expect them." Today, Daniel here experienced that firsthand. But the mark of a true artist isn't how they perform when everything goes perfectly. It's how they respond when everything falls apart. And Daniel, you showed up, and you kept going. That's what matters. The crowd applauded, and Daniel felt emotion welling up in his chest. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a validation of every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt he'd experienced on his journey. Backstage, the tech crew was working frantically on the amplifier. The head technician, a man named Keith Patterson, who'd been doing live sound for 25 years, had diagnosed the problem: a damaged internal circuit board that had been compromised during the hasty loading and transport. They couldn't repair it in the field, but they'd located a backup unit from another stage and were in the process of configuring it to work with Daniel's setup. "How much longer?" Rebecca asked, checking her watch. It was now 6:47 p.m. 10 minutes, Keith said. "Maybe 15 to be safe. We need to run a sound check once we get it connected." Rebecca nodded and radioed to the stage manager. "Tell George we need 15 more minutes." On stage, George received the message through his in-ear monitor and acknowledged it with a subtle nod. 15 more minutes. He could do that, standing on his head. "Well, folks," he said to the crowd, "it looks like we've got a little more time together. Anyone want to hear All My Exes live in Texas?" The crowd erupted, and George launched into the up-tempo song that had been one of his biggest hits. Daniel provided rhythm on the guitar, and for those few minutes, the Twisted Fork Festival main stage became the most joyful place in all of Texas. People were dancing in the mud-soaked field, singing along to every word, completely lost in the moment. But something was happening that no one backstage had anticipated. The crowd wasn't just tolerating this unexpected acoustic set while they waited for the main show to resume. They were falling in love with it. This intimate, stripped-down performance was connecting with them on a level that a fully amplified set might not have. Claire Donovan, a music journalist from Austin who'd been covering the festival for Texas Music Monthly, was in the crowd taking notes. She'd seen George Strait perform dozens of times over the years, but she'd never seen him quite like this. Relaxed, spontaneous, genuinely enjoying himself without the pressure of a headline show. And the interaction between George and this young artist was something special. A passing of the torch moment that was unfolding in real time. She pulled out her phone and tweeted, "Watching George Strait and Daniel Rivers create magic at Twisted Fork. This is country music at its purest. Everyone needs to be here right now." Within minutes, her tweet was being shared across social media. People who'd left early or were at other stages started migrating toward the main stage, drawn by the word of mouth that something extraordinary was happening. At 7:02 p.m., Keith gave the thumbs up. The amplifier was fixed and tested. Daniel's equipment was ready to go. Rebecca radioed the stage manager again. "Tell them we're good. Daniel can resume his full set whenever they're ready." The stage manager passed the message to George through his in-ear monitor. But George was in the middle of telling a story to the crowd, and he didn't want to interrupt the flow. He finished the story, which got a big laugh from the audience, and then started into another song, "I Cross My Heart." Backstage, Tyler was getting nervous. Why isn't George bringing Daniel back to his full set? The equipment's ready. Rebecca was watching the crowd, and she understood what George was doing. "Look at them, Tyler. They're completely captivated. George knows what he's doing. He'll bring it around when the moment's right." At 7:14 p.m., George finally addressed the situation. "Well, folks, I've got some good news. The crew has fixed Daniel's equipment, which means he's ready to give you the show you came here for." He paused, gauging the crowd's reaction. There were some cheers, but also groans of disappointment. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, "George, we're kind of enjoying this acoustic thing you've got going here." The crowd roared its agreement. George smiled. "I appreciate that. I really do. But here's the thing. I came here tonight to present an award and support young artists like Daniel. I didn't come here to steal anyone's thunder. This is his stage, his moment, and he's earned it. So, what I'm going to do is step aside and let this talented young man show you what he can really do with a full band and all his equipment working properly." There was applause, but it was mixed with vocal protests from sections of the crowd. People were actually asking George not to leave. Hold on, George said, laughing. "I'm not leaving the building. I'll be right here, and I'll see you all later for the awards ceremony. But right now, I want you to do something for me. I want you to give Daniel Rivers the same energy and love you've been giving me. Can you do that?" The crowd responded positively, and George turned to Daniel, who'd been standing off to the side for the last few minutes, taking it all in. "Daniel, this stage is yours. Go show them what you've got." George started to walk off stage, but as he passed Daniel, the younger man grabbed his arm gently. "George," Daniel said, his voice not picked up by the microphones, "thank you. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," George replied, "because someone did it for me a long time ago. And that's how this works. We lift each other up. Now get out there." As George exited stage left, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. But there was something in their response that made Rebecca, watching from backstage, feel a knot forming in her stomach. The crowd was still buzzing about George Strait. As much as they appreciated Daniel Rivers, as much as they'd enjoyed his acoustic performance alongside the legend, the energy had shifted. They'd just experienced something unexpected and magical, and now they were being asked to transition back to the originally scheduled program. Daniel took his position at the center of the stage as his band joined him, their equipment now fully functional. Pete, Jake, and Linda were ready, their instruments properly amplified. "Thank you all so much for your patience," Daniel said into the microphone. And thank you to George Strait for that incredible gift. Now, let's make some noise. The band launched into Highway Horizon, one of Daniel's most popular songs, with full electric instrumentation. The sound was powerful, professional, exactly what Daniel had rehearsed for months. His voice soared over the music, and by any objective measure, it was a great performance. But the crowd's energy wasn't quite matching it. They were clapping, they were listening, but there was something missing. That electric connection that had been so palpable during the acoustic set with George. Backstage, Tyler saw it too. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "This is what we practiced. This is the show." George Strait had found Rebecca and was standing beside her, also watching the performance. He saw what was happening, and his expression grew thoughtful. "This kid is good," George said to Rebecca. "Really good. But he's following the hardest act in the world to follow. A moment of pure spontaneity. That's the trap. You can't manufacture that magic. You can only respond to it." Rebecca nodded, worried. "What should we do?" George thought for a moment. "Nothing right now. Let him find his footing. He's got the talent. He just needs to trust it." Out on stage, Daniel was pushing through, determined to deliver the show he'd prepared. He went into his second song, then his third, each one professionally executed. The crowd was responding, but not with the enthusiasm he'd hoped for. During a brief pause between songs, while the band was adjusting, Daniel heard someone in the front row yell, "Bring back George!" The comment cut through him like a knife. He tried not to let it show, but standing there under the stage lights with 15,000 people watching, he felt a wave of doubt crash over him. Was this how his big moment was going to be remembered? Not as his breakthrough, but as the show where George Strait accidentally overshadowed him? He glanced toward the side of the stage and saw George standing there with Rebecca. Their eyes met for a brief second, and George gave him a subtle nod, a gesture of encouragement that said, "Keep going." Daniel took a breath and stepped back to the microphone. He made a decision in that moment, one that would define not just this performance, but his entire career moving forward. "You know what?" he said to the crowd, his voice more relaxed now, more genuine. "I'm going to be honest with you all. I practiced a specific set for tonight, a very carefully planned show. But after what we just experienced, after getting to share that stage with George Strait, continuing with the plan feels wrong. So I'm going to do something different." He turned to his band. "Let's go acoustic. All of us." Pete, Jake, and Linda exchanged glances, then nodded. They understood what Daniel was doing. "See, here's the thing," Daniel continued, addressing the crowd. "I could stand up here and try to impress you with big sounds and flashy production. Or I can stand up here and just sing you songs the way they were meant to be heard. Honest, simple, real." George reminded me tonight what country music is really about. It's about the story. It's about the connection. So if you're willing, I'd like to tell you some stories. The crowd's energy shifted immediately. This was what they wanted: authenticity, vulnerability, a real human being sharing something genuine. Daniel began playing an acoustic version of his song "Broken Fences," which told the story of his relationship with his father, a man who'd worked hard his entire life and had died before seeing his son achieve his dreams. The song was deeply personal, and Daniel sang it with every ounce of emotion he had. The field grew quiet, thousands of people listening intently. You could have heard a pin drop. When he finished, the applause was different, warmer, more heartfelt. This was the connection Daniel had been searching for. "My dad never got to see me on a stage like this," Daniel said softly, "but I like to think he's watching somehow." He's the one who taught me that hard work and honesty matter more than anything else. And he loved George Strait's music, which is why singing Amarillo by Morning earlier with George was—" He paused, collecting himself. "It was one of the greatest honors of my life." He continued with his acoustic set, sometimes joined by his bandmates, sometimes performing solo. He told stories between songs, sharing the inspiration behind each one, making the audience part of his journey. The performance had transformed from a rehearsed show into something far more intimate and powerful. Backstage, George was smiling. "That's it," he said to Rebecca. "That's what I was waiting for. He found it." By 7:52 p.m., as Daniel was finishing his final song, the crowd was completely with him. They'd taken a journey together, from the chaos of technical difficulties to the unexpected gift of George's impromptu set, and finally to this authentic, stripped-down performance that showcased Daniel's true artistry. Daniel thanked the crowd, thanked the festival, thanked his band, and finally, with genuine emotion, thanked George Strait for showing me what this is really all about. As he left the stage to thunderous applause, Daniel felt different than he had when he'd arrived that morning. He'd expected this day to be about proving himself, about showing everyone what he could do. Instead, it had become about something far more important: understanding what kind of artist he wanted to be. But as Daniel and his band cleared the stage, preparing for the awards ceremony that would follow, none of them could have predicted what was about to happen next. Because out in that crowd, something had been brewing. A collective feeling that was about to express itself in a way that would surprise everyone. Daniel, George, Rebecca, and the entire festival staff. The people had spoken during that performance, not just with their applause, but with their hearts. And they were about to make their feelings known in a way that would turn this already extraordinary day into something that would be talked about for years to come. The main act was over, but the real drama was just beginning. The stage crew moved with practiced efficiency, clearing Daniel's equipment and setting up for the awards ceremony. The Emerging Artist Award presentation was scheduled to begin at 8 p.m. sharp, and Rebecca wanted everything perfect. This was one of the festival's most prestigious moments, when the industry and the audience came together to celebrate new talent in country music. Daniel was in the green room, still processing everything that had happened. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands were trembling slightly from the adrenaline, and his mind was racing through every moment of the performance. Pete, Jake, and Linda were with him, along with Tyler, who was already fielding calls and messages. "Danny, you need to see this," Tyler said, holding up his phone. "Social media is exploding. People are posting videos from your set, and they're going viral. Look at this." He showed Daniel a Twitter thread from Claire Donovan, the music journalist who'd live-tweeted the entire performance. Her final tweet read, "Just witnessed something extraordinary at Twisted Fork. George Strait proved why he's a legend, and Daniel Rivers proved why he's the future. But together, that was country music history." The tweet had been retweeted thousands of times already, and comments were pouring in from people who'd been in the crowd and others who were seeing the videos being shared across platforms. Daniel read through some of the comments, overwhelmed by the positive response. "I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it," Linda said, squeezing his shoulder. "You earned this, Danny. Every second of it." A production assistant knocked on the green room door. "Daniel, they need you backstage in 5 minutes for the awards ceremony. You're one of the nominees for Emerging Artist." "Right," Daniel said, trying to shift his mindset. He'd almost forgotten that part of the evening. In the chaos of the day, the nomination had been pushed to the back of his mind. He changed into a fresh shirt, ran a comb through his hair, and followed the production assistant toward the stage area. The sun had fully set now, and the festival grounds were lit by thousands of lights. Stage lights, vendor booth lights, string lights strung between posts, and the glow of phone screens from the crowd. The main stage had been transformed for the ceremony. A podium stood at center stage, flanked by large video screens that would display the nominees and presenters. Chairs had been set up in a VIP area near the front for industry professionals, nominees, and special guests. Daniel took his seat among the other nominees in the Emerging Artist category. He recognized some of them, fellow musicians he'd crossed paths with at various venues and showcases. They exchanged nods and brief congratulations on making it this far. Rebecca took the stage first, welcoming everyone to the awards ceremony portion of the evening. She thanked the sponsors, the volunteers, the fans, and all the artists who'd performed throughout the day. Her speech was warm and genuine, reflecting her deep love for country music and the community it created. "Tonight, we honor the future of country music," she said. "The Emerging Artist Award recognizes someone who embodies the spirit, talent, and authenticity that makes this genre timeless. And this year, we have the honor of having a true legend present this award. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome George Strait." The crowd erupted as George walked onto the stage, waving to the audience. Even after performing earlier, even after decades in the spotlight, his presence still commanded attention. He stepped up to the podium, holding an envelope. "Thank you, Rebecca," George said. "You know, I remember when I was an emerging artist. It was a long time ago, and the business was different then. But some things never change. It still takes the same dedication, the same love of music, and the same willingness to put yourself out there. Night after night. Show after show." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "I had the privilege earlier today of sharing the stage with one of tonight's nominees, Daniel Rivers, and I've been listening to the others throughout the day. Every single person nominated tonight deserves recognition. They're all talented, they're all working hard, and they all represent the future of country music." Daniel felt his heart pounding. Being mentioned by George Strait in front of 15,000 people was already more than he'd ever expected from this day. "But there can only be one winner," George continued, "and the Emerging Artist Award goes to—" He opened the envelope, and a smile spread across his face. "Daniel Rivers!" The crowd exploded into cheers and applause. Daniel sat frozen for a moment, unable to process what he'd just heard. Pete was pulling him to his feet, pushing him toward the stage. His legs felt like they weren't quite connected to his body as he walked up the steps. George met him at the podium, shaking his hand firmly and pulling him into a brief hug. "Congratulations, son. You earned this." Daniel took the award, a beautiful glass sculpture etched with the Twisted Fork Festival logo, and stepped up to the microphone. The stage lights were bright in his eyes, and for a moment, he couldn't find words. Wow, he finally said, his voice shaking slightly. "I honestly don't know what to say. This has been the most incredible, challenging, frustrating, and ultimately amazing day of my life." The crowd laughed and cheered. "Everything that could go wrong today did go wrong," Daniel continued, finding his footing. "Our bus broke down. We got stuck in traffic. We barely made it in time. And then my equipment failed. But standing here right now, I realize that all of those obstacles led to something I never could have planned or imagined. The opportunity to share a stage with George Strait, to learn from him, and to remember why I fell in love with country music in the first place." He looked at George, who was standing off to the side of the stage. "George, thank you for showing me that it's not about the production or the plan. It's about the connection. It's about being honest with the audience and with yourself. That's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my career." He held up the award. "This belongs to everyone who supported me along the way. My band, Pete, Jake, Linda. You guys are the best. Tyler, my manager, who somehow got us here despite everything. My dad, who's not here anymore, but who taught me what hard work and integrity mean. And all of you out there who listened tonight, who gave me a chance. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. As Daniel left the stage to another round of applause, he felt like he was floating. This was what success felt like. Not just the award, but the validation, the recognition, the sense that all the years of struggle had been worth it. But as the ceremony continued with other awards and presentations, something was happening in the crowd. People were talking among themselves, an energy building that the festival staff hadn't anticipated. Claire Donovan noticed it first. She was moving through the crowd, interviewing fans for her article, and she kept hearing the same sentiment repeated in different ways. "I wish George had played longer," one woman said. "That acoustic set was the best part of the whole festival," a young man added. "I would pay to see George and Daniel do a whole show together," another person chimed in. By the time the awards ceremony wrapped up at 8:47 p.m., a chant had started in one section of the crowd, growing louder and spreading. "One more song! One more song! One more song!" Rebecca heard it backstage and felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The festival was technically over. They'd run through the entire schedule, including overtime to make up for the weather delays earlier. But the crowd was making it very clear what they wanted. George heard it too. He was preparing to leave, having fulfilled his commitment to the festival. But the chant gave him pause. Daniel was still backstage with his band when Tyler rushed over. "Do you hear that? They're asking for more. They want George," Daniel said, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. "And I don't blame them. He's incredible." "No," Tyler said, pulling out his phone to show Daniel the social media feeds. "Look at what people are posting. They want both of you. Together." Daniel scrolled through the posts, seeing comment after comment asking for George and Daniel to do one more song together. The videos of their earlier acoustic collaboration were being shared thousands of times, with people tagging friends and saying things like, "This is what country music should be," and "2 generations, 1 stage, pure magic." Rebecca appeared, looking stressed but excited. "Daniel, George, I need to talk to both of you." George had walked over, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on, Rebecca?" "The crowd wants more," she said simply. "They want you both to do another song together. Now, I know this isn't what we planned, and I know we're already past schedule, but..." She gestured toward the stage, where the chant was growing even louder. "They're not leaving. They want this." George looked at Daniel. "What do you think?" Daniel felt torn. Part of him was exhausted, emotionally drained from the roller coaster of the day. But another part of him, the part that had fallen in love with music in the first place, knew that what the crowd was asking for was special. "I think we'd be crazy to say no," Daniel said. George smiled. "Then let's give them what they want. One more song." Rebecca's face lit up. "Really? You'll do it?" "We drove these people through rain and technical difficulties," George said. "If they still want to hear music, the least we can do is play for them." Word spread quickly through the festival grounds. The stage crew, who'd been in the process of breaking down equipment, reversed course and set up microphones and acoustic guitars. The production team got the lighting and sound systems back online. At 9:03 p.m., Rebecca took the stage and made an announcement that sent the crowd into a frenzy. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard you loud and clear. George Strait and Daniel Rivers have agreed to perform one more song together. Please welcome them back to the Twisted Fork Festival stage." The roar from the crowd was deafening. As George and Daniel walked out onto the stage, both carrying acoustic guitars, the energy in the air was electric. This wasn't part of anyone's plan, which somehow made it even more special. "Well, George said into the microphone. "It seems you folks aren't quite ready to go home yet." Cheers and applause. Daniel and I were backstage trying to figure out what song to play, and we realized something. We've been doing this backward. All night I've been picking the songs. But this is Daniel's night, his award, his moment. So I asked him, "What song means the most to you? What song do you want to share with these people?" George turned to Daniel, giving him the floor. Daniel stepped forward, emotion already thick in his voice. "There's a song that my dad used to sing to me when I was a kid. It's an old folk song that's been covered by a lot of country artists over the years, but it's never been a big commercial hit. It's just one of those songs that gets passed down, generation to generation, because it speaks to something true about life and family and home." He paused, collecting himself. "My dad passed away 5 years ago, and I haven't been able to sing this song since then. It was too painful. But tonight, after everything that's happened, after getting to share this stage with someone who reminds me of my dad in a lot of ways, the integrity, the authenticity, the love of music done right, I think I'm finally ready." The song is called "Rivers Run Home." There was a murmur through the crowd. It was indeed an old song, one that many people knew, but that hadn't been performed by a major artist in years. George put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I'd be honored to sing it with you." They began playing, their guitars in perfect harmony. Daniel started singing the first verse, his voice strong but vulnerable. "I've traveled down 1,000 roads, chased dreams across the sky, but every mile that takes me far makes me wonder why George joined in on the second verse, his legendary voice blending with Daniel's in a way that created something greater than either could achieve alone. The mountains rise, the valleys fall, the seasons come and go, but there's a truth I've come to learn in everything I know." And then, together, they sang the chorus, their voices intertwining like two rivers meeting. Rivers run home, they always do. No matter how far they roam, they find their way back to where they started. Rivers run home by the second chorus. The entire crowd was singing along. 15,000 voices joining George and Daniel in a moment of collective emotion. People had their arms around each other, swaying to the music, phones forgotten as they lived completely in the moment. Claire Donovan, standing in the press area, felt tears streaming down her face. In 20 years of covering music, she'd never witnessed anything quite like this. This wasn't a performance. It was a communion. On stage, Daniel was singing through his own tears, thinking about his father, thinking about the journey that had brought him here, thinking about how strange and perfect it was that all of today's disasters had led to this transcendent moment. George, too, was moved. He'd performed thousands of shows in his career, won countless awards, played for crowds many times this size, but there was something about this moment. The spontaneity, the authenticity, the connection between him and this young artist, between both of them and the audience. That reminded him why he'd devoted his life to country music. As they reached the final verse, the stage lights dimmed slightly, leaving just a warm glow on the two musicians. The crowd had gone quiet again, hanging on every word. "So when I'm lost, and far from where my heart has always known, I close my eyes and hear the song that leads me back to home." The final chorus swelled, and this time the crowd sang even louder, the sound of those voices carrying across the Texas night like a prayer. Rivers run home. They always do. No matter how far they roam, they find their way back to where they started. Rivers run home. When the song ended, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began. Not the explosive, excited applause of earlier, but something deeper, more profound. It was the sound of 15,000 people expressing gratitude for having witnessed something they knew they'd never forget. George and Daniel stood there, side by side, just taking it in. Then George did something unexpected. He stepped back from the microphone and began applauding Daniel, gesturing for the crowd to focus their appreciation on the younger artist. "This man right here," George said, pointing to Daniel, "is the future of country music. Remember his name. You're going to be hearing it for a long time." Daniel was overwhelmed, barely able to speak. "Thank you, George. Thank you all. This has been..." He couldn't finish the sentence. There weren't words adequate to describe what he was feeling. As they left the stage together, the crowd's applause continuing, Rebecca met them backstage with tears in her eyes. That was... She couldn't finish either. "Yeah," George said simply. It was. The festival officially ended at 9:34 p.m., but people lingered, not wanting to leave, not wanting to break the spell. They stood in small groups, talking about what they'd witnessed, sharing videos with each other, processing the experience. In the green room, Daniel sat with his band and Tyler, still holding his award, still trying to make sense of the day. "So," Pete said with a grin, "how does it feel to have your life completely change in one day?" Daniel laughed, a sound of pure, exhausted joy. "Ask me tomorrow when I've slept for 16 hours. Tyler was already in management mode, fielding calls and messages. "Danny, you need to hear this. I've got 3 record labels asking to meet with you. Country Music Television wants to interview you. And Rolling Stone Country wants to feature you in their next issue. Your career just went into hyperdrive." "Because of George," Daniel said quietly. "Because of both of you," Tyler corrected. People aren't just talking about George Strait being generous to a young artist. They're talking about the music you made together, the authenticity you showed, the way you handled adversity. You earned this, Danny. A festival volunteer appeared at the door. "Mr. Rivers, Mr. Strait would like to speak with you before he leaves. He's in the VIP area." Daniel stood immediately. Of course. He found George in a quiet corner of the VIP tent, signing autographs for a few remaining fans. When George saw Daniel, he excused himself and walked over. "Hell of a day," George said. "That's an understatement," Daniel replied. They stood there for a moment, 2 musicians separated by age and experience, but connected by something indefinable. "I want you to know something," George said seriously. "What happened out there tonight wasn't charity. I didn't do you a favor. We made music together, real music, the kind that matters. You held your own with me on that stage, and that's not something everyone can do. I learned so much from you today," Daniel said. "About music, about handling pressure, about remembering why we do this," George finished. "See, here's what I've learned in all my years in this business. Success isn't about the awards, or the #1 hits, or the sold-out arenas. Those things are nice, don't get me wrong. But the real success is those moments when you connect with people through music, when you create something genuine and honest that resonates with folks. You did that tonight, multiple times." He pulled out a business card and handed it to Daniel. "This has my manager's number on it. I want you to call. Let's talk about maybe doing some shows together, maybe co-writing something. I think we make pretty good music together." Daniel stared at the card, stunned. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack. But here's the condition. You have to promise me you'll stay true to yourself. Don't let the industry change who you are or what your music represents. Deal?" "Deal," Daniel said, shaking George's hand firmly. As George left the festival, waving one last time to the fans who'd gathered near the exit, Daniel stood there holding that business card like it was made of gold. Tyler found him a few minutes later. "Ready to head back to Austin?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "Let's go home." But as they loaded into the rental van that would take them back, much more comfortable than the cramped truck ride earlier, Daniel realized that home meant something different now. Home wasn't just a physical place, it was this feeling, this community, this music that connected people across generations and distances. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire Donovan. "Check Twitter. You're trending nationally. On Rivers Run Home is the #1 hashtag in the country right now." Daniel opened the app and scrolled through thousands of tweets, people sharing videos of the performance, talking about what it meant to them, how it reminded them of why they loved country music. Some were from people who'd been at the festival, but many were from people who'd only seen the videos online and were moved by what they witnessed. One tweet caught his attention from a woman in Montana. "My dad passed away last year. He loved country music. Watching George Strait and Daniel Rivers sing Rivers Run Home together made me cry, but in a good way. It reminded me that music has the power to heal. Thank you both." Daniel showed the tweet to his band, and they all fell quiet for a moment. "This is why we do it," Linda said softly. "Not for the awards or the fame, for that." As the van pulled onto the highway, heading north toward Austin, Daniel looked out the window at the Texas landscape lit by moonlight. Somewhere out there, 15,000 people were driving home, carrying the memory of tonight with them. And across the country, thanks to social media, countless others were discovering the magic that had happened on that stage. The day had started with a broken-down bus and had nearly ended in disaster. But somehow, through a series of unexpected events and one legend's generosity, it had transformed into something Daniel could never have planned or predicted. A perfect example of how the best moments in life often come from chaos, how obstacles can become opportunities, and how genuine human connection will always triumph over perfect execution. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion finally catch up with him. Tomorrow, there would be interviews and meetings and decisions to make. But tonight, he could just be grateful for the journey, the music, and the unexpected grace of a day when everything went wrong in exactly the right way. Rivers run home, he thought, smiling. They always do. Daniel woke up at 11:37 a.m. to the sound of his phone vibrating continuously on the nightstand. For a moment, he was disoriented, not quite remembering where he was or what day it was. Then the memories of the previous evening flooded back, and he sat up quickly, his heart racing. The sunlight streaming through his apartment windows told him he'd slept late, but after the emotional and physical exhaustion of yesterday, his body had needed every minute of that rest. He reached for his phone and immediately understood why it had been buzzing. 73 missed calls, 216 text messages, notifications from every social media platform overflowing his screen. "Holy," Daniel breathed, scrolling through the messages. They were from everyone. Friends he hadn't talked to in years, distant relatives, musicians he'd met once at a showcase, industry professionals whose numbers he didn't even have saved. But the first call he returned was to Tyler, who answered on the first ring. "There you are. I was about to drive over and make sure you were still alive." "I'm alive," Daniel confirmed, his voice still rough with sleep. "Barely. What's happening, Ty? What's happening?" "Danny, you've gone viral. Not just country music viral. Actual, mainstream, everywhere viral. The videos from last night have been viewed millions of times. You're on Good Morning America's website, Entertainment. Tonight is talking about you, and I've got every major label in Nashville calling me." Daniel walked to his kitchen and poured himself coffee from the pot he'd set on a timer the night before, grateful for past him's foresight. This is insane. It was just one performance. It wasn't just anything, Tyler said. It was authentic, emotional, and it came at exactly the right moment when people needed to see something real. The story has everything: the underdog musician facing obstacles, the legend stepping in to help, the spontaneous collaboration, the emotional finale. It's perfect. Daniel sat on his couch, sipping his coffee and opening his laptop. A quick Google search of his name brought up dozens of articles, all posted within the last 12 hours. George Strait and Daniel Rivers create country music magic at Twisted Fork Festival. Unknown Singer's Day from Hell becomes career-making moment. Watch the performance that's making everyone fall in love with country music again. He clicked on one article from Country Music Today and read Claire Donovan's piece, which had been published at 2:47 a.m. She must have stayed up all night writing it. Last night at the Twisted Fork Festival, I witnessed something I've been searching for my entire career as a music journalist. A moment of pure, unscripted artistic magic. When Daniel Rivers' equipment failed and George Strait stepped in to help, nobody could have predicted what would unfold. What began as a technical crisis transformed into a masterclass on authenticity, humility, and the true spirit of country music. The article went on to describe the entire evening in vivid detail, capturing not just what happened, but what it meant. Claire had a gift for articulating the emotional resonance of music, and she'd poured that gift into this piece. "Danny, you still there?" Tyler's voice pulled him back to the phone call. "Yeah, sorry. I'm just processing." "Well, process faster because we need to make some decisions. I've got interview requests stacking up, and we need a strategy. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" "Make it 2 hours. I need a shower and actual food." "Fair enough, 2 hours. And Danny, congratulations. Your life just changed." After hanging up, Daniel sat quietly for a moment, letting it all sink in. His entire career, he'd imagined what this moment would feel like. The breakthrough, the recognition, the validation. But he'd always pictured it happening gradually, a slow build of success. Not this sudden explosion. His phone rang again. This time, it was his mother calling from Abilene. "Daniel James Rivers, I have been trying to reach you all morning. I just saw you on the Today Show website. They played that video of you and George Strait, and I cried right there at the breakfast table. Your father would have been so proud." Emotion hit Daniel like a wave. "Hi, Mom. Yeah, it's been quite a day. Well, yesterday was, and today is turning into... Everyone in Abilene is talking about you. The coffee shop had your video playing on their TV. The local news wants to interview me. My phone has been ringing off the hook. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. But are you okay? I know yesterday was difficult with the bus breaking down and everything else." "I'm okay, Mom. Better than okay. It's overwhelming, but in a good way." They talked for 20 minutes, his mother catching him up on which relatives had called her, which neighbors had stopped by, which former classmates had reached out on Facebook. It was surreal hearing about his sudden fame from the perspective of his hometown. After finally convincing his mother he was fine and promising to visit soon, Daniel showered, dressed, and made himself breakfast. As he ate, he scrolled through social media, reading reactions to the performance. One thread that caught his attention was from actual country music stars, established artists commenting on the videos. Keith Urban had tweeted, "This is what country music is all about," at George Strait showing the next generation how it's done, and Daniel Rivers' music proving he's got what it takes. Beautiful. Miranda Lambert had posted on Instagram, "Crying watching this. Authentic country music is alive and well. these two just reminded us all why we fell in love with this genre. Even artists from outside country music were weighing in, praising the authenticity and emotional power of the performance. At 1:43 p.m., Daniel arrived at Tyler's office in downtown Austin. His manager's workspace was a modest suite in a building that housed several other music industry professionals, agents, producers, booking managers. Tyler had started as an independent manager 5 years ago and had slowly built a roster of promising artists, with Daniel being his flagship client. "There he is," Tyler said, standing up from behind a desk covered in notes and printouts. "The man of the hour. Coffee? I've had 3 cups already. My hands are shaking enough as it is." Tyler laughed and gestured to a chair. Spread across his desk were offers, proposals, and messages from various industry players. "Okay, let's talk strategy. We've got some serious opportunities here, but we need to be smart about how we proceed." "I'm listening." "First, the labels. We've got offers from 3 major labels: Big Machine, Warner Music Nashville, and Sony Music Nashville. They're all interested in signing you. The deals range from traditional record contracts to more artist-friendly partnerships. We need to review each one carefully. But Danny, these are legitimate offers from top-tier labels." Daniel had dreamed about this moment for years. A major label deal meant resources, distribution, marketing support. Everything an independent artist struggled to access. "What's your gut telling you?" Daniel asked. Tyler leaned back in his chair. "My gut says we need to be careful not to jump at the first shiny offer. You have leverage right now. Real leverage. You're hot, you're trending, and they know it. We can negotiate a deal that's favorable to you, that gives you creative control and fair compensation." "Okay, what else?" "Media appearances. We've got requests from Ellen, Jimmy Fallon, The Today Show, and Kelly Clarkson's show. They all want you to perform, preferably with George, if he's willing. I've reached out to George's team to gauge his interest. George gave me his manager's card last night," Daniel said, pulling it from his wallet. "He said he wanted to talk about doing some shows together." Tyler's eyes widened. "He what? Danny, do you understand what that means? George Strait doesn't collaborate with just anyone. If he's seriously offering to do shows with you, that's huge." "I know. It still doesn't feel real." "Make it real. Call that number today. George's interest in you is pure gold in this industry. It validates you in a way that no amount of label support could." They spent the next 2 hours going through every opportunity, every offer, every request. Tyler was methodical, making sure Daniel understood the implications of each decision. It was overwhelming, but Tyler's steady guidance helped Daniel feel like he wasn't drowning in all of it. "There's one more thing," Tyler said, pulling out a specific email. "This came from the producer of the CMA Awards. They want you to perform at the ceremony in November. It would be your first time performing at a major awards show." Daniel felt his breath catch. The CMA Awards were the pinnacle of country music recognition. To perform there as an emerging artist was extraordinary. "What would I perform?" "They're suggesting something from last night, either one of your originals from the acoustic set, or, if George agrees, a duet performance of Rivers Run Home. They think the story of what happened at Twisted Fork would resonate with the television audience." "This is all happening so fast." "I know, but Danny, this is what you've worked for. This is the moment. We just need to make sure we make the right moves so that this momentum turns into a lasting career, not just a viral moment." Tyler was right, Daniel knew. There were countless examples of artists who'd had a moment of fame only to fade away when they couldn't sustain it. He needed to be strategic, thoughtful, and true to the artistic vision that had connected with people in the first place. "What do you think I should do first?" Daniel asked. First, call George's manager. That connection is special, and we need to nurture it. Second, let's schedule meetings with the labels, but make it clear we're taking our time to make the right decision. Third, let's book one major media appearance. My vote is The Tonight Show, because Jimmy Fallon loves country music and would give you a great platform. And fourth, let's get back in the studio and start recording. You've got momentum. Let's channel it into new music. Daniel nodded, feeling the path forward becoming clearer. Okay, let's do it. They spent another hour making calls and sending emails. Daniel reached out to George's manager, a professional woman named Patricia Coleman, who'd been working with George for over 20 years. She was warm on the phone and immediately knew who Daniel was. "George hasn't stopped talking about you since last night," Patricia said. "He told me to make you a priority if you called. What can we do for you, Daniel?" George mentioned possibly doing some shows together. I wanted to explore what that might look like. Let me talk to George and get back to you with some dates. He's got a pretty full touring schedule, but I know he'll make room for this. He was genuinely moved by what happened last night. And when George feels that way about an artist, he follows through. I really appreciate that, ma'am. Call me Patricia. And Daniel, take care of that gift you have. It's rare to see someone so young with that kind of authentic connection to traditional country music. The industry needs more artists like you. After the call, Daniel felt a weight lift. These weren't just empty opportunities being thrown at him. These were real people who genuinely believed in his music. By 4:30 p.m., he was exhausted again, mentally drained from making decisions and processing information. Tyler noticed and suggested they call it a day. "Go home, rest, and let this all sink in," Tyler said. "Tomorrow, we'll start executing the plan. But tonight, just be proud of what you've accomplished." Daniel walked out of the office into the late afternoon Austin heat. The city was busy with its usual Saturday energy: tourists on 6th Street, joggers on the trail, musicians setting up for evening gigs. Everything looked the same as it always had. But Daniel felt fundamentally changed. His phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Band meeting at my place tonight. Linda's making dinner. Be there at 7. No excuses." Daniel smiled. His band, his family. In all the chaos of overnight success, he'd almost forgotten to check in with them. At 7:04 p.m., Daniel arrived at Pete's house in South Austin, a small bungalow that Pete shared with his girlfriend. Linda's car was already there, along with Jake's truck. Inside, the smell of home-cooked food greeted him. Linda had made her famous chicken enchiladas, and the table was set for 4. "There he is," Pete said, pulling Daniel into a hug. "How you holding up, superstar?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "It's surreal." They sat down to eat, and for the first hour, they just talked like they always did. Stories from the road, jokes about embarrassing gigs they'd played, gossip about other musicians in the Austin scene. It was normal, comfortable, exactly what Daniel needed. But eventually, Jake brought up the elephant in the room. "So, what happens to the band now? Are we still together? Or are you going solo?" The question hung in the air. Daniel had been avoiding thinking about it, but it was legitimate. Major label deals often meant session musicians, touring bands assembled by management. A whole different structure than the independent setup they'd had. "Nothing changes," Daniel said firmly. "I mean, yes, things are going to be different with the label and the bigger shows, but you 3 are my band. I'm not doing this without you. Whatever deals get made, you're part of them." Linda's eyes welled up. "You mean that?" "Of course I mean it. We built this together. Yeah, it's my name on the marquee, but we're a team. That doesn't change just because suddenly everyone's paying attention." Pete raised his beer. "To the best damn country band in Texas." They all clinked glasses, and Daniel felt grounded again. This was real. The friendships, the music, the journey they were on together. Although, Jake said with a grin, we might need to renegotiate our cut now that you're dating George Strait. Everyone laughed, and Daniel threw a napkin at him. We're not dating. We performed a few songs together. A few songs that broke the internet, Linda pointed out. You two have chemistry, Danny. Musical chemistry. That's special. I know. It's intimidating, honestly. How do I follow up something like that? By being yourself, Pete said. That's what connected with people. Not you trying to be George Strait or anyone else. Just you, singing honest songs, telling real stories. That's your strength. They talked late into the night, making plans for the future, dreaming about the tours they'd do, the venues they'd play, the music they'd make. It felt good to dream together, to remember that this success belonged to all of them. At 11:23 p.m., as Daniel was leaving, Linda stopped him at the door. Hey, she said quietly, I just want to say I'm proud of you. Not just for last night, but for how you're handling all of this. It would be easy to let it go to your head, to forget where you came from. But you're staying grounded, and that's going to matter in the long run. Thanks, Linda. That means a lot. Driving home through the quiet Austin streets, Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. Yes, his life had changed dramatically in the past 24 hours. Yes, there were huge decisions to make and massive opportunities ahead. But at his core, he was still the same person who'd fallen in love with country music as a kid, who'd learned guitar from his father, who'd spent years playing tiny venues for handfuls of people. Success hadn't changed who he was. It had just given him a bigger stage to be himself on. Back at his apartment, he found one more text waiting for him. This one from an unfamiliar number. Daniel, this is George. Patricia gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing with all the attention. It can be overwhelming. If you ever need advice or just want to talk about the music business, call me anytime. You've got something special, kid. Don't let anyone take that away from you. George. Daniel read the message 3 times, hardly believing it. George Strait, the king of country himself, had reached out personally, offering mentorship and support. He typed back, Thank you, George. That means more than you know. I'll take you up on that offer. Still processing everything, but grateful for your guidance. The response came quickly. Get some rest. The real work starts tomorrow, but enjoy this moment. You earned it. Daniel set his phone down and lay back on his couch, staring at the ceiling. 24 hours ago, he'd been stranded on the side of a highway, wondering if his big chance was slipping away. Now, he was fielding calls from major labels, planning television appearances, and getting mentoring texts from George Strait. Life could change in an instant. Dreams could materialize out of chaos. And sometimes, the obstacles that seemed like disasters were actually disguised blessings, pushing you towards something better than you'd ever planned. As he drifted off to sleep, Daniel's last thought was of his father, imagining him watching from somewhere, proud of the man his son had become, and the music he was making. Rivers run home, Daniel thought one more time. They always do. 3 weeks had passed since the Twisted Fork Festival, and Daniel's life had transformed into a whirlwind he was still learning to navigate. He'd signed with Warner Music Nashville after careful negotiation that gave him significant creative control, a rare arrangement for a new artist, but his viral moment had given him leverage. The contract protected his artistic vision while providing the resources and distribution he needed to reach a broader audience. His band, Pete, Jake, and Linda, had all signed on as his official touring musicians with fair compensation packages that Tyler had fought hard to secure. They'd hired a road manager, a sound engineer, and were in the process of planning a proper national tour for the following spring. But today, on a warm May afternoon in Nashville, Daniel stood in Ocean Way Studios, one of the most legendary recording spaces in country music history. The walls had heard Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, Keith Urban, and countless other icons lay down tracks. And now, Daniel was here to record his first single for the label. The song was "Rivers Run Home," the emotional centerpiece of that magical night at Twisted Fork. The label wanted to capture lightning in a bottle, to preserve the authenticity of that performance, while giving it the production quality it deserved. And George Strait was in the studio with him. "You nervous?" George asked as they stood in the control room listening to the playback of the instrumental track. "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "This song means so much now after what happened. I don't want to mess it up." "You won't," George said confidently, "because you're not overthinking it. We're going to go in there, stand at the microphone together like we did at the festival, and just sing. That's it. No tricks, no gimmicks, just two guys sharing a song." The producer, a veteran named Marcus Henderson, who'd worked on dozens of platinum country albums, agreed. The magic of that night was the simplicity and the emotion. That's what we're going to capture here. They'd spent the morning rehearsing, finding the right key that would showcase both their voices, deciding on arrangements and harmonies. But now, as evening approached and the studio filled with that golden late afternoon light, it was time to record. Daniel and George stepped into the main room, a large space with perfect acoustics and warm lighting. Two microphones stood side by side, just like at the festival. No elaborate setup, no separation. Just two artists together. "Whenever you're ready," Marcus said through the talkback. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his father, about the journey that had brought him here, about that night at Twisted Fork when everything had gone wrong and somehow ended up perfect. He nodded to George, and they began. The first take was good. The second was better. By the third take, they found that ineffable something, that spark that turns a good performance into a transcendent one. Their voices wove together like they'd been singing together for years, not weeks. The emotion was raw and real, each word carrying the weight of genuine feeling. When they finished the third take, there was silence in the control room for a long moment. Then Marcus hit the talkback button. "That's it. That's the one. You can come listen if you want, but I'm telling you right now, that's your single." Daniel and George walked back into the control room and listened to the playback. Even through the studio monitors, the performance was powerful. You could hear the connection between them, the respect, the shared understanding of what the song meant. "Damn," George said quietly. "That's special, Daniel. That's really special." Marcus was already thinking ahead. "I'll do minimal production on this. Maybe some gentle strings in the bridge, a bit of reverb to warm it up, but nothing that takes away from the vocals. This is about you two and the song. Everything else is just support." After the session wrapped at 6:47 p.m., Daniel and George walked out of the studio into the Nashville evening. The city was alive with music pouring out of honky-tonks on Broadway, tourists taking photos, aspiring musicians carrying guitar cases to their next gig. "Buy you a beer?" George offered. "I'd be honored." They ended up at Robert's Western World, a legendary honky-tonk that served cold beer and hot-fried bologna sandwiches. Despite George's fame, he moved through the crowd with ease. He was Nashville royalty, yes, but he was also just a guy who loved country music and appreciated a good dive bar. They found a table in the back, away from the band that was playing on the small stage up front. "So," George said after they'd ordered, "how are you really doing with all this? The sudden fame, the pressure, the expectations?" Daniel thought about the question carefully. "Honestly, it's overwhelming. I wake up some mornings and can't believe this is my life now, but I'm trying to stay focused on the music, on the reasons I started doing this in the first place. That's smart. This business will eat you alive if you let it. The attention, the money, the fame, it's all seductive. But it's also hollow if you lose track of why you're here. How did you handle it? When you first got big? George took a long drink of his beer. I had good people around me. My wife, Norma, she kept me grounded. My band became my family. And I made a decision early on that I wasn't going to let Nashville change who I was. I was a Texas country singer, and that was going to come through in my music, no matter what the trends were. I want that, Daniel said. I want to build something lasting, not just have a moment. Then you need to be prepared for the long haul. This first wave of attention will eventually fade. Not completely, but it'll level out. That's when you find out what kind of artist you really are. Can you keep making good music, even when you're not the hot new thing? Can you connect with audiences on a Tuesday night in Tulsa, the same way you do on a big festival stage? That's the test. Centrifuge. They talked for over an hour, George sharing stories from his 40-plus years in the business, the lessons he'd learned, the mistakes he'd made, the moments that had defined his career. Daniel absorbed every word, recognizing this for what it was. A master class from a legend. There's something I've been wanting to ask you, Daniel said, as they were finishing their second round. Why me? Why did you go so far out of your way to help me that night? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. George was quiet for a moment, considering the question. When I saw you up on that stage, dealing with that equipment failure, I saw myself 40 years ago. Young, talented, dealing with obstacles that weren't your fault. But more than that, I heard something in your voice during that sound check. An authenticity that's rare these days. This business has a way of polishing all the rough edges off artists until they're smooth and marketable, but not particularly interesting. You still had your rough edges, your unique voice. I didn't want to see that lost. He leaned forward. And if I'm being completely honest, singing with you reminded me why I fell in love with this music in the first place. It wasn't just me helping you. You helped me remember something important too. Daniel felt emotion rise in his chest. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for my career. Make good music. Stay true to yourself. Help the next kid who's struggling. That's how you thank me. They parted ways outside the bar, George heading to his hotel and Daniel walking back toward his rental car. As he drove back to his temporary apartment in Nashville, he'd been spending more time here than Austin lately. Daniel reflected on how surreal this had all become. His phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. CMA's confirmed. You're performing Rivers Run Home with George at the ceremony in November. This is massive, Danny. Absolutely massive. Daniel pulled over to respond properly. This was a huge moment. The CMA Awards were watched by millions of people, and performing there would introduce him to an even broader audience. But as he sat in his car, Nashville lights twinkling around him, Daniel realized something important. The accolades were nice, the opportunities were exciting, but what mattered most was the music itself. That moment at Twisted Fork, the recording session today, the late-night conversations with George about the craft, those were the real gifts. 2 days later, Warner Music Nashville released Rivers Run Home as Daniel's debut single. The marketing campaign was simple but effective. Behind-the-scenes footage from the recording session, clips from the Twisted Fork Festival performance, and interviews where Daniel and George talked about the song's meaning. The response was immediate. The single hit #1 on the iTunes country chart within hours. Country radio stations across the nation added it to their playlists. Streaming numbers exceeded everyone's projections. But more meaningful than the commercial success were the stories people shared about what the song meant to them. Social media filled with personal testimonials. People talking about lost parents, about finding their way home after difficult journeys, about the power of authentic country music to heal and connect. One message on Daniel's Instagram came from a veteran who'd struggled with PTSD after returning from deployment. "Your song helped me finally talk to my family about what I was feeling. Thank you for being honest in your music." Another came from a young woman who'd moved far from her small town to pursue her dreams. "Every time I feel lost in the city, I play Rivers Run Home and remember where I come from. Your music reminds me that I can chase my dreams and still honor my roots." These messages meant more to Daniel than any chart position or sales figure. This was impact. This was connection. This was why he'd devoted his life to music. Tyler called with updates on tour planning. "We're looking at theaters and small arenas for the spring tour. Nothing too big. We want to maintain that intimate feeling. But Danny, we're getting interest from major markets. Dallas, Houston, Chicago, Denver, Seattle. People want to see you live." "That's great, but let's make sure we also book some smaller venues," Daniel said. "I don't want to forget about the clubs and honky-tonks that gave me my start. Already on it. We're planning a mix, some bigger shows in major cities, but also intimate venues where you can really connect with the audience." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Daniel did his appearance on The Tonight Show, where Jimmy Fallon gushed about Rivers Run Home and asked Daniel to perform it. The performance was stripped down, just Daniel with an acoustic guitar, and it went viral all over again. He filmed music videos, did radio interviews, wrote new songs for his upcoming album, and started rehearsing with the band for the tour. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities. But through it all, Daniel made a conscious effort to stay grounded. He called his mother every Sunday. He made time for his band to just hang out and jam without any pressure. He went to local songwriter nights in Nashville, sitting in the audience and listening to other artists, reminding himself that he was part of a community, not above it. In September, George invited Daniel to join him for a show at the Houston Rodeo, one of the biggest country music events in Texas. Daniel would open, and then George would do his full set. The crowd would be enormous, over 70,000 people. The night of the show, Daniel stood backstage at NRG Stadium, looking out at the vast arena filling with people. It was the biggest crowd he'd ever faced, and the nerves were intense. George found him there, recognizing the look of pre-show anxiety. "Breathe," George said simply. "They're just people who love country music. Same as the folks in Lockhart. Just more of them. Easy for you to say. You've done this 1,000 times. And I still get nervous before big shows. That's a good thing. It means you care. But once you step out there and start singing, the nerves will transform into energy. Trust me." George was right. When Daniel walked onto that massive stage and the crowd erupted, when he strapped on his guitar and started singing, everything else fell away. It was just him and the music and 70,000 people sharing a moment together. He performed 5 songs, ending with "Rivers Run Home," and the audience's response was overwhelming. They sang along, they swayed with lighters, and phone lights held high. And when he finished, the applause seemed to shake the stadium. Afterward, as George was preparing for his own set, he pulled Daniel aside. "You're ready for this, kid. You're ready for all of it. Now go build the career you deserve." That night, watching from the side of the stage as George performed his legendary set, Daniel felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the opportunities, not just for the success, but for the journey itself. The obstacles that had taught him resilience, the failures that had taught him humility, the unexpected moments that had taught him to embrace spontaneity. A year ago, he'd been playing small clubs, wondering if he'd ever get his big break. 6 months ago, he'd been struggling to get on a festival lineup. And that day at Twisted Fork, what had started as a disaster had become the defining moment of his career. But more than that, it had taught him what really mattered: authenticity, connection, staying true to the music, and the reasons he'd fallen in love with it in the first place. The CMA Awards November arrived, and with it came the CMA Awards ceremony at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. Daniel spent the day of the show in rehearsals, working with George and the production team to perfect their performance of Rivers Run Home. The producers wanted something special, not just a recreation of the Twisted Fork moment, but an elevation of it that would capture the television audience while maintaining the authenticity that had made it special in the first place. They decided on a simple but powerful staging. Daniel and George would perform on a darkened stage with a single spotlight. Just the two of them with acoustic guitars, exactly as they'd done at the festival. No backup singers, no elaborate production, just pure country music. That evening, as Daniel arrived at the arena in a suit he'd never imagined being able to afford, he felt like he was living in a dream. The red carpet was filled with the biggest names in country music, artists he'd admired his entire life, and they knew who he was. They congratulated him, told him they loved his song, wanted to know about his upcoming album. Inside the arena, during the show, Daniel sat with Tyler and his bandmates. They watched as awards were presented, as performances lit up the stage, as the country music community celebrated itself. And then it was time. The presenter took the stage and told the story. How a young artist's equipment had failed at a festival. How George Strait had stepped in. How a moment of crisis had become a moment of magic. The audience in the arena and millions watching at home heard about Daniel's journey, saw clips from Twisted Fork, understood the context of what they were about to witness. "Ladies and gentlemen," the presenter said, "performing Rivers Run Home, please welcome Daniel Rivers and George Strait." Daniel walked onto that stage with George, and the applause was thunderous. The spotlight came up, illuminating just the two of them in a pool of warm light while the rest of the arena darkened. They took their positions at the microphones, guitars in hand, and for a moment before they started playing, George turned to Daniel and smiled, a look of pure encouragement and support. Then they began. The performance was flawless. Every note, every word, every harmony was perfect. But more than that, it was genuine. You could see the connection between them, hear it in their voices, feel it in the way they looked at each other as they sang. When they reached the final chorus, the cameras panned across the audience and caught something remarkable. Tears streaming down the faces of hardened industry veterans, young artists singing along with hands over hearts, legends of country music nodding their approval. The final note hung in the air, sustained and powerful, before fading into silence. For 3 full seconds, the arena was completely quiet. Then the applause erupted, not polite award show applause, but a genuine, overwhelming response. The entire audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. Daniel stood there, overwhelmed, as George put an arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. "That's how it's done," George said quietly, just between them. As they left the stage, walking past the cameras and the backstage crew who were also applauding, Daniel felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just success. This was validation of everything he'd worked for, everything he believed about music, everything his father had taught him about integrity and authenticity. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Daniel didn't win any awards that night. He hadn't expected to, being so new to the scene, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that performance, that moment, that connection with millions of people watching across the country. After the show, there was a reception at a nearby venue where the country music community gathered to celebrate. Daniel found himself surrounded by artists he'd admired for years, all of them wanting to talk to him, to congratulate him, to tell him they were excited about his future. But the moment that meant the most came near the end of the evening when an older gentleman approached him. Daniel didn't recognize him at first, but Tyler whispered, "That's Vince Gill." Vince shook Daniel's hand warmly. "I just wanted to tell you something. I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen a lot of young artists come and go. Most of them are chasing fame or money or some version of success that doesn't have much to do with music. But tonight, watching you up there with George, I saw something rare. An artist who understands that it's about the song, about the connection, about the truth in the music. Don't ever lose that." "I won't," Daniel promised. "I can't afford to. It's all I have." Vince smiled. "No, son. It's all you need." 6 months later, it was a warm spring evening in Austin, and Daniel was back where it all started, at a small venue called the Broken Spoke, a legendary honky-tonk that had been hosting country music for over 60 years. He'd played here dozens of times in his early days, sometimes for crowds of 20 people or less. Tonight, he was doing a surprise show, announced only a few hours earlier on social media. The venue, which held 300 people, had a line around the block within minutes of the announcement. This was part of his commitment to himself. No matter how big the stages got, no matter how many arena shows he played, he'd always come back to places like this. The small venues, the honky-tonks, the clubs where country music lived and breathed in its purest form. Pete, Jake, and Linda were with him, setting up their equipment on the tiny stage. Tyler was at the bar, chatting with the owner. His mother had driven down from Abilene to see the show. And scattered throughout the crowd were musicians Daniel had come up with, friends who'd supported him long before anyone knew his name. As he took the stage at 9 p.m., Daniel looked out at the crowd. People pressed together, beer in hand, ready for good music. This felt right. This felt real. "Hey, y'all," he said into the microphone. "Thanks for coming out tonight. I know some of you have been here with me before, back when we were just hoping 10 people would show up. And some of you are here because of everything that's happened this year. But tonight, we're all just here for the music. So let's have some fun." He launched into "Dust on the Dashboard," one of his original songs, and the crowd immediately responded. They knew the words, some from hearing it on the radio, some from being at those early shows where he'd first performed it. Between songs, Daniel told stories, not about the CMAs or the Tonight Show or the arena tours, but about his father teaching him guitar, about the first time he'd played this very stage and been so nervous he'd forgotten the words to his own song, about the friends who'd believed in him when he'd doubted himself. "You know," he said after finishing his 4th song, "I got asked the other day in an interview what the highlight of my career has been so far. And people expected me to say the CMA Awards or signing my record deal or something like that. But honestly, it's moments like this. It's playing for people who actually care about the music, who aren't here because it's trendy or because they're supposed to be. You're here because you love country music, and that's what makes this special." He played for 2 hours, taking requests from the crowd, bringing up a couple of local musicians to jam with him, creating the kind of spontaneous, joyful musical experience that reminded him why he'd started down this path in the first place. Near the end of the set, he introduced "Rivers Run Home." "This song changed my life," he said simply. "But more than that, it taught me something important about obstacles and opportunities. See, the day I was supposed to perform at Twisted Fork Festival, everything went wrong. The bus broke down, We got stuck in traffic. My equipment failed. I thought it was a disaster. But those obstacles pushed me into a moment I never could have planned. Sharing a stage with George Strait, making music that connected with people in a way I'd always hoped for, but never quite achieved. He paused, emotional. So now when things go wrong, when obstacles appear, I try to remember that maybe they're not disasters. Maybe they're just pushing me towards something better than I could have imagined. Life has a way of working out if you stay open to it. He sang "Rivers Run Home," and the entire venue sang along. 300 voices joined his, filling that small space with sound and emotion and community. This was country music. Not the industry, not the business, but the actual heart of it. People coming together to share stories and songs, to feel less alone, to connect through music. After the show, Daniel stayed for hours, talking to fans, signing autographs, taking photos, and just listening to people's stories. A young woman told him she'd started learning guitar after hearing him talk about his father teaching him. An older man said "Rivers Run Home" had helped him reconnect with his estranged son. A teenage kid asked for advice about pursuing music as a career. "Stay true to yourself," Daniel told the kid. "Don't try to be what you think the industry wants. Be authentic, work hard, and trust that if you make good music, people will respond to it." It was past midnight when Daniel finally left the Broken Spoke. Tyler walked with him to his truck, both of them tired but satisfied. "You could have done this show at an arena and sold 10,000 tickets," Tyler said. "Why here?" Daniel looked back at the venue, its neon sign glowing in the darkness. "Because this is home. These are my people, and I never want to forget that." George told me that the real test isn't whether you can perform when you're hot. It's whether you can keep making meaningful music when the spotlight fades. "I need places like this to remind me what matters." "You're going to have a long career, Danny. I'm sure of it." Daniel smiled. "I hope so. But even if everything ended tomorrow, even if I never had another hit, I'd still have this. I'd still have the music and the people who care about it. That's enough." 1 year after Twisted Fork, Daniel stood on the side of Interstate 35, looking at the exact spot where their bus had broken down a year ago. He'd driven out here on purpose, wanting to mark the anniversary in a meaningful way. A year ago, he'd stood here in panic and frustration, watching his dreams seemingly fall apart. Now, he was a CMA-nominated artist with a platinum record, a successful tour under his belt, and a second album in the works. But more than the external markers of success, he'd gained something far more valuable: a clear understanding of who he was as an artist and what kind of career he wanted to build. His phone buzzed. A text from George. "Happy anniversary of the day everything went wrong and turned out perfect. Proud of you, kid. Keep making good music." Daniel smiled and typed back, "Thank you for everything, George. You changed my life." The response came quickly. "You changed your own life. I just gave you a push. See you next month for those shows we're doing together." Daniel pocketed his phone and stood there for a few more minutes, reflecting on the journey. The obstacles that had seemed insurmountable a year ago had indeed pushed him towards something better. The equipment failure that could have ruined his big moment had instead created a once-in-a-lifetime collaboration. The chaos and stress had forced him to be vulnerable and authentic in a way that connected with millions of people. "Rivers Run Home." The song's message had proven true in his own life. No matter how far he traveled, no matter how big the stages got, he always found his way back to what mattered: honest music, genuine connection, staying true to his roots. As he climbed back into his truck and headed toward Austin, Daniel thought about what his father would say if he could see him now. He'd probably tell him the same thing he always had: work hard, Stay humble, and remember, that character matters more than fame. Daniel was doing his best to honor that wisdom. The success was wonderful. The opportunities were incredible. But what he was most proud of was maintaining his integrity, supporting other artists coming up behind him, and making music that meant something. His career was just beginning, really. There would be more albums, more tours, more challenges and triumphs. But he felt ready for it all now. He understood that obstacles were part of the journey, that authenticity mattered more than perfection, and that the best moments often came from the unplanned, spontaneous connections between artists and audiences. The sun was setting as Daniel drove toward Austin, painting the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Somewhere ahead was his next show, his next song, his next opportunity to connect with people through music. And somewhere behind him was that highway shoulder where everything had changed, a reminder that sometimes the worst days become the best stories. Daniel turned on the radio and heard his own voice singing, "Rivers Run Home." He smiled, thinking about how far he'd come and how grateful he was for every twist and turn along the way. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but that was okay. He'd learned to embrace the journey, to trust the process, to stay true to himself no matter what came next. And in the end, that's what being an artist was all about. Not the awards or the fame, but the courage to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep making music that mattered. Rivers run home, Daniel thought one more time, pulling onto the highway and heading toward whatever came next. They always do.